Tēnā koutou katoa no tamaki makaurau ahau ko Kenzi i toku ingoa. Hi everyone, I am from Auckland and my name is Kenzi. I am currently doing a Master of Science in Geography at the University of Auckland, and I'm very excited to be able to share with you my ongoing master's research titled Insects as Food, a case for doing insects differently in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Just a bit of background, overview of my presentation and what I'll be covering. I'll be covering a bit of background on my research, why edible insects, a bit of literature as to the gaps I found and what theories I'll be using to inform my research, as well as my research question and objectives and associated methodologies, as well as the next steps for my project. So insects. Insects are increasingly represented as this food of the future and are held to offer significant potential in addressing global environmental, social, and economic concerns related to the conventional protein production. And according to market research predictions, they're estimated to reach $4.63 billion by 2027. And actors within this industry claim that this growth is largely driven by three things: pressure on food resources from population growth, increasing demand for protein-rich sources, and the high cost of animal protein. And in my honors research, it became clear that these Malthusian narratives are significant elements in summoning a particular food future. Not only do they have performative effects, i.e. insects constructed as a superfood solution, but they also have informative effects on investors, entrepreneurs, and R&D initiatives. And it is exactly these claims I want to bring into my research and interrogate. There are some researchers such as Payne and colleagues who have voiced concerns about the unacknowledged socio and political aspects of food that implicitly inform all research in this emerging field. And I wanted to situate my research in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And from a quick Google Trend search, this interest in edible insects in Aotearoa seemed to have kind of picked up in July 2013. Keep in mind what I have on this slide is by no means exhaustive, but rather indicative of the kind of activities and actors involved in this emerging economy. And it seems that so for example, Eat Crawlers, a company that has started in 2013, they sell chocolate-coated insects, lightly salted insects, and lightly seasoned insects. And they describe themselves as New Zealand's first and largest edible insect and cricket flour manufacturer and supplier. And they offer insect-based food products such as cricket flour, cricket pasta, and insect lollipops. And similarly, Otago locusts, though they don't have as wide of a variety, they do offer farm locusts as food for human consumption. And on the other hand, there has been other organizations that have branched into producing insects as animal feed. For example, INZ Direct, they supply live insects, dried insects, as well as insect-based garden fertilizers. And Kalmana Gardens I've included there as they have a potentially halted black soldier fly farm that they use to convert organic waste. I say potentially halted because the last time I spoke to them, they said it's kind of stopped, but they have it kept in a shed. And at the same time, there has been ongoing research experimentations by researchers in Crown Research Institutes, such as the one by Payne and Ryan, where they studied consumer acceptance of insect consumption. And they may be others. They definitely will be others. But that is the task I want to continue in my master's research. I'm wanting to look at other actors such as entomologists, chefs, and policy actors who are interested in future foods or insects as food. So with the literature review, I found that similarly with the unaddressed socio-political concerns, even though they are a small minority, but this field is definitely growing. For instance, in an article by Miller and colleagues, they argue that these claims around insects bringing positive benefits to marginalized groups, it remains a subjunctive claim that is not consistently pursued. How exactly this should work is not explained. So this is assumption that the benefits that edible insects bring will trickle down to communities. However, these are the type of claims that we need to question. And in another critical review of arguments for and against animal product alternatives, Broad concludes that as long as animal product alternatives continue to be market-based, it is incompatible with food sovereignty. However, its compatibility with food justice is much less clear. The author proposes a food tech justice lens, which consists of an active engagement with the history and present of food system marginalization and inequity, forging just transitions between farmers and workers, and explore how tech can coexist with traditional livelihoods in developing nations and support food tech entrepreneurs from these communities. And in a more recent article by Alexandra Sexton, the author brings to light the concerning confluence between Silicon Valley and food. Significantly, the author highlights that the alternative protein being situated in Silicon Valley marks a shift in the alternative protein ontological politics, where food becomes technology. And it highlights concerns around how food systems will come to be organized and who will continue to control food. Despite these concerns, what I found despite these concerns, how exactly we might do insects otherwise has yet to be explored. So my research aims to contribute to these growing conversations about the need for greater scrutiny about the edible insect economy. And in answering the question of how do we build more just insect food systems, I find that analyses of edible insects can benefit from engagement from the STS scholarship, or Science and Technology Studies scholarship, more than human geographies and care theory. So an STS approach investigates the mundane, taken for granted things, and acknowledges and contends that there is no view that comes out of nowhere, and asks how things come to be constructed, stabilized, and naturalized. And this perspective particularly takes seriously the role of embeddedness. It runs counter to the idea that an individual or thing can operate independently, and instead sees a mosaic of interconnected networks of humans, non-humans, practices, beliefs, discourse, and values. And connected to this strand of literature is the more than human geographies. A more than human approach illustrates the way that humans and non-humans are co-constituted. And a core element of this approach is that it decenters human agency, and it gives rise to the more than human agency. And it has a particular focus that I really like to read about on enabling relational, respectful ethics with non-human others. For instance, through a more than human approach, Chow demonstrates that parasite species of monocrop oil palms symbolizes as resilient entities that refuse to bend to the dictates of the agribusiness model. And in another studies by Wilbur and Gibbs, they demonstrated the agency of food with its sensory abilities in producing discernible effects on researchers and other actors which shape social, economic, and political outcomes. And what comes to mind for me is that there are certain sensory qualities of certain insect species that are more pronounced than others, are seen as more cooperative than others. For example, the house cricket and the black soldier fly, and therefore are more able to be subjected as a tradable good. And in thinking about more than human geographies and praxis, I find myself drawn to care theory. So for instance, Middleton and Samanani describes care theory as an ethic, starting with an acknowledgement of human interdependency with others and formulating an ethics that acknowledges, supports, values, and deepens this interdependency. And on the other hand, De La Bella Casa describes caring as an effective state, a material vital doing, and an ethico-political obligation. And altogether, my research draws from these theories to help me think through what human-insect relationships do we aspire towards assembling, and how might we achieve this? And to this, to help answer this question, I have 3 objectives: to identify actors, human and non-human, who are and aren't involved in this edible insect industry in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to identify current engagements and practices in working with insects in this nascent industry, and to theorize current relationships between human and insects in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Sorry for the pause there, my dogs are barking. In light of calls for greater engagement with more power-aware and materialist-focused approaches to alternative protein, my research aims to answer how we might reassemble non-exploitative relationships with, between human and insects through a place-based relational approach. For instance, grounded normativity, as proposed by Coulthard and Simpson, not only elucidates mutualistic relationships between human and non-humans, but also redirects attention to the importance of recognizing and working with Indigenous place-based practices and knowledges when we do engage in materialist work. So using this to ground my research, I'll be using archival material and key informant interviews to document the history and current environment of insects as food in Aotearoa. I'll be using secondary sources to identify the diverse New Zealand-based actors, practitioners, knowledges, and care practices and networks in the New Zealand edible insect industry. And I'll also be conducting interviews alongside ethnographic observations, if I'm able to with contemporary insect actors across different networks. And lastly, I'll be conducting a comparative analysis, and I want to build protocols and frameworks for practice of care. So the next steps, my ethics application is conditionally approved, yay, and I am awaiting a full approval to conduct interviews and ethnographic observations. And to read, observe, and reflect, I've put that in because I know as much as I can read, it's also important for me to observe and reflect my own experiences in taking on new methodologies that I might not be necessarily the most familiar with, but I understand the importance of kind of sitting with the discomfort or difficult experiences that it may bring in starting this journey. So I've kind of put that as a self-reminder. And these are my references. And that is all. Thank you so much to the SANS 2021 Conference Organizing Committee for providing us with this opportunity to present and share our work with everyone here, despite the restrictions. And a very special thank you to my supervisor, Emma, who has been so lovely in supporting my master's research. And if anyone is really interested in my work and want to share their thoughts or just start a korero, I'm very happy to talk to you guys, and please do contact me if that is something you're interested in. And thank you very much for this opportunity.